Here's a confession. As a boy, I never learned the right way to pray the Rosary, meaning with the mysteries and the other traditional prayers associated with it. It was given to me in a little black plastic case with a tiny fold-out booklet. But not having gone to Catholic school or grown up in a family that prayed the Rosary, after I lost the booklet, I just prayed it my own way, which was very simple. Just Hail Marys and Our Fathers, eventually with the Apostles' Creed, since I knew that from Mass. Sometimes I would wake up and forget about my Rosary, and it would be left behind in the tangle of sheets. My mother would often warn me that one day it would fall out of the sheets and land on the floor, and she didn't want to run over it with the vacuum cleaner. Well, one day it did, and she did. When I came home from school, it was on my bedpost, missing a few beads after its battle with our old Hoover vacuum. As you can see, I told you, she said. I've prayed with this Rosary and with many others for years, but in my own way. Once, on a pilgrimage to Lourdes, I was asked to lead the Rosary on the plain in front of 300 pilgrims. I warned them, I don't do it the right way. They insisted, so I started. At one point, they said, "You forgot to announce the mysteries." I confessed I wasn't able to remember them. I pray them when I have a guide, but they're hard to memorize. "It's Wednesday," someone shouted. "That doesn't help," I said. On the way home, they asked another Jesuit, my friend Brian Frayne, and he knew them all. I'm still a little embarrassed that I can't remember all the mysteries or the official way to pray them, no matter how many booklets I buy. And believe me, I've tried. Over these past 50 or so years. But I'm not embarrassed to say I pray the Rosary often, sometimes a few times a day, in my own way, now and at the hour of our death.
When you walk through the storm, hold your head up high, and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm is a golden sky and the sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone.
It's been shared with me that in Boston, many Unitarian Universalist churches are filled with people like myself, former Catholics, and some of whom might have similar experiences to mine. I hope today that our efforts, or my efforts, I'm hoping our efforts, as much as you're open to re-engage with elements of that faith, open ways to engage with elements of this faith. And for those who come from other faith traditions or the Unitarian Universalist faith tradition has always been your faith tradition, I invite you to a sense of maybe opening and wonder and listening, not just to me, but to what's calling you to listen to some of the rituals that exist in your life and have existed, maybe have troubled, maybe still trouble, and what way feels like a way out or a way back in. Throughout this service, we've been invited into a greater time of deepening and reflection together through several rituals. Some with tactile elements, candles, booklets. I would even argue that on Zoom screens, there is the screen, right? And we are humans living in a material world. And in our humanity, there's the opportunity to re-engage with the world and its traditions. The traditions that have brought us here, that have sustained us, and yes, at times even hurt us, with new eyes and open hearts. When I first began identifying as a Unitarian Universalist, I think over 9.5 years ago now, I was all about the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, combined with the mystery and wonder and the many sources of our faith. What I didn't know then is that this journey into a faith tradition that so many of us call our own has brought me further into elements of a faith tradition that I ran from for many years. And I ran for a host of very good reasons: patriarchy, homophobia, hypocrisy, censure. In an effort to make peace with both and to honor my ancestors and my truth, I'm here before you today. Many Unitarian Universalist churches are peppered with former Catholics. It's something I know anecdotally, especially after I began writing and preaching on my multi-faith journey within this faith and speaking to others about it. For many years, and still today, what's sometimes hard to speak about in Unitarian Universalist spaces is my Catholic faith still. I speak about it, and it still troubles me to bring it forth for a host of reasons. I don't know how it's going to affect others, and then that ritual element, it seems like anathema in many ways to many folks. So here I am outing myself to you all, especially when it comes to rituals that tie me to family. In my case, the ritual of the Rosary. Prayer beads, we know, are found in a variety of other faith traditions. Buddhist traditions, the Episcopalians have prayer beads, though they're not as popularized. They're often used to calm the mind through repeated prayers, the beads serving as tactile markers for counting. As we heard from our reading, there are different ways to pray the Rosary, ways that evolved over time, both communally and individually. The gentle and loving message of openness and informed experimentation is something that freed me, and I would say freed me to deepen my relationship with some members of my family. My grandmother, Mela, her name was Carmela, was the only person of her generation in my immediate family who I believe at the time was able to see, accept, and meet me fully in the more liberal parts of my identity. When I told her that I was joining a new church and that I was thinking about the ministry, she at first asked me, well, do they believe in God? And I said, well, not all of them. And then she asked me, well, is it a good community? And I said, yes. She's like, are you happy there? And I said, yes. And that's all she needed. I never got the chance to come out to her as queer. and I wish I had. I wish I had given her the chance to see more of me. But I did get to tell her that I had found this faith tradition where I could preach and write. I did get to tell her that this faith journey would take me all the way to conferences, general assemblies across the United States, and study at Harvard Divinity School in Boston, the city she first emigrated to in exile. She was so proud that I was here. And even though it was years after we would attend our last Christmas Eve Mass together at her parish, St. John the Apostle, where I was baptized, I did get to pray the rosary with her at her bedside. I used to think that I first learned about the rosary in first grade from a nun, Sister Rose, at the Catholic school that I attended. She taught us about the apparition of the Virgin in Fatima, Portugal, to young children, and I entrusted them with the prayers. However, I would argue that that was book knowledge. What I first learned and have continually learned of the Rosary has been through observation, through practice, through ritual, and largely through family. The ritual of the Rosary was my abuela Mela's ritual, that she prayed almost every day of her life without fail. I never asked her who taught her this practice, but I know she did pray it with her mother, Ana Lucia, who I called my abuelita Ita, that means in the diminutive, very small grandmother. At the kitchen table, prayer books or pamphlets and wooden or metal or plastic beads in hand. I remember that one smelled like roses. But who did Mela learn this daily contemplative ritual from? Was it from Ita, her mother? Was it from friends in her young Catholic women's group in Cuba? And when did Mela begin the daily practice? Or was it something that she took up as a resurgence of the practice in the late 20th century due to the interest taken by Pope John Paul II, a religious leader she highly respected and got to see when he visited Miami, something she was very proud to share. I like to think that amidst the trauma and pain and stressors of exile and the strength she had, that the Rosary was my grandmother's Mela's mode of quieting her mind, of centering herself, of connecting with her God and the Virgin Mary. Through the stories about some of the women in other people's lives, I learned that my grandmother's practice was something not uncommon in the Latin American Catholic female practices. Torn up, there was a torn up book that she had later on in life, one of those pamphlets, right? One of the pamphlets that Father Martin had talked about. And she would read through it over and over again, but it was torn up and she couldn't see it anymore because of her deteriorating vision. So I had made a blown up version in large fonts for her and put it in a binder. But she appreciated that, but then I found that she held on to that pamphlet as well. And when I was with her on that Christmas Eve, that last Christmas Eve that I spent with her, she had remembered the last prayer of it. Her hand was in mine, prayers amidst the beeping of the hospital room. A few days later, I would return to Cambridge, and a few days after that, she would be sent to home hospice. I then learned from my mother, who had partly grown up in Boston, who identified more as an English than Spanish speaker, and who had resisted saying the Rosary in Spanish for years, said it at my grandmother's side, in my grandmother's home, with her. And after my grandmother died, a friend had offered to pray it with me while I was up here. While Unitarian Universalism gave me an affirming space for my queerness, As a Unitarian Universalist, as I shared earlier, it has been a struggle knowing how out I can be about my Catholicism. And as someone on the ordination track, it has a different kind of sheen and responsibility. When I bring up my journey with the Catholic faith, it might be triggering to some. And if it's something that you'd like to talk about further, I invite you to reach out to me. Rethinking and reimagining Catholic and other rituals from my ancestors for me is an ongoing practice. It's one that's allowed me to interrogate and question and still very much love much of what formed and informed the beginnings of my journey as a person of faith in this life. And it's my faith in the principles and the people that keeps me asking questions and not settling for the status quo. I can be queer and you. A friend of mine identifies as a queer Catholic. Can I be a Catholic you? I don't know. I'm still asking. What I do know is when I pray my rosary, it is both my grandmother's, my mother's, and mine, in our own ways, connecting us. What are the rituals and traditions that you have discovered on your ancestral journeys so far? Can a few of them come to mind? Do a few of them come to mind? You might want to learn or relearn about them. Maybe try them. Sit with others in communal space. Connect with your ancestors if it feels sometime that it's right for you to do. You'll know.